I wasn't even two yet. And they told my dad that I only had 3 weeks to live. Now, at that time, my parents, like franticking, they took me to Costa Rica, the best specialist they could find, Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and no one could cure me. Like there was no answer. They went to Miami. My mom with me she left my older siblings in Nicaragua, and I got the life-saving operation that I needed. Now, that was wonderful for me and for my family, but that also meant, it wiped them out, right? So all the money was used on me. But at the same time, because of what happened to me when I was a baby or, a toddler, I felt really guilty and also felt that I owed them everything, right? Because if it hadn't been for me or my operation, right, they would have the finances to have had a better couple years in the United States, more financial security, so many more opportunities. And so I felt that I had to succeed, had to give my parents back everything that they sacrificed for me.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about creating limitless lives and balanced success. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Esther Zeledon. Dr. Esther is the president and co-founder of Be Act Change. She is also an author, speaker, international developer, environmental scientist, entrepreneur, and former diplomat. You can reach Esther at her website, beactchange.com, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Esther. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I am excited to have this conversation. And if it's okay, I would love to start with your immigration story. And let's let people know that your amazingness was not handed to you on a silver spoon, that you had to go through some hard things to be able to get to where you are today. And I think that helps other people, give them permission that they can be awesome too.
Yes, of course. No, I'd love to share that. And actually, I'm going to go give you a story right before we even immigrated. So actually, when I wasn't even two yet. And they told my dad that, and my parents, my both my parents, that I only had 3 weeks to live. I had this condition where, my urethra was so close that I couldn't urinate. So I had turned yellow, yellow, yellow. Now, at that time, my parents, like franticking, they took me to Costa Rica, the best specialist they could find, Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and no one could cure me. Like there was no answer. So my dad, who's not necessarily like, a religious man, but he believes in like faith and destiny and all these things, he convinced my mom to buy the lotto. And the way the lotto was designed in Nicaragua, it's 10 little coupons that you basically 10 people can buy the same number. Yeah. And so they ended up splitting it between my aunt. And my mom was very hesitant because she's like, there's other priorities right now. Your daughter's dying. There's all these things going on. Why are you buying this? And he's like, no, we need to buy this, convince my aunt. And the story goes that I chose the numbers. So we win. And because we win, they went to Miami. My mom with me she left my older siblings in Nicaragua, and I got the life-saving operation that I needed. And so they had to stay 6 months. Now, that was wonderful for me and for my family, but that also meant, it wiped them out, right? So all the lotto money was used on me. Because, think about paying cash in the United States for health services. It's astronomical. And, for context for global viewers, it's astronomical. And then paying for like stay, food, all that, right? So it all went there. So when they returned back to Nicaragua, my dad at that time had worked in government. At that time, civil war was starting to engulf the country. There was a dictatorship. Things were getting really dicey. And my parents they were like, okay, we need to leave. And then my dad got a bomb threat. So we're like, no, that's it. We got to go. And so my dad, that option, he was like, okay, but we need to figure out how to leave in a way that doesn't cause too much attention, that, somehow can put us, in a situation that, that we have something. And so my dad applied to graduate school programs. And so we were kind of looking at the US or, Europe or Canada. And at the end, it chose the US. But when we moved to the US, right, again, we had no money. They had to leave all the house and everything behind to not have any attention to them leaving. So when we left, it was kind of like, oh, we're leaving for this, but we're coming back. But we were really leaving to immigrate. So we had to go from the bottom. And so, I grew up definitely, it was a strange relationship that I had with growing up in the United States, because I had parents that had, careers and lives in their country, right? And they were educated, but then here we were, moving to the US, and totally different circumstance, like where discrimination, my mom was wrapping presents in Macy's, my dad was a student juggling different jobs, and the immigrant train, and so I was the one who cut the coupons in the house. We never went out to restaurants. I always hold close to my heart Red Lobster, because we would go once a year to celebrate something monumental. And I know something so silly as that in the US is a chain, but for me, I still hold it that because it was such a big deal to go there, to celebrate something instrumental. So, but at the same time, because of what happened to me when I was a baby, or, a toddler, I felt really guilty, and also felt that I owed them everything, right? Because if it hadn't been for me or my operation, right, they would have the finances to have had a better couple years in the United States, more financial security, so many more opportunities. And so I felt that I had to succeed, had to give my parents back everything that they sacrificed for me, and my siblings too. The time that my mom was away had really affected my sister. So I kind of grew into this people pleaser, I guess you can say, perfectionist, that I had to chase those check marks, and I had to succeed and do well at all costs. And the last thing I ever wanted to be was a burden again. And it's really interesting how we translate these things right internally. So, my thing is that, yeah. So I hustled, and then we had to move to Miami when my dad lost his graduate graduate school scholarship. Like, it was a change in funding, and so we had to leave. So he went back actually years later to Nicaragua to find work. And then the rest of us moved to Miami, because my mom's like, I can't go back there and lose everything again. And so I need to be here. And so she was working night jobs, and my dad was in Nicaragua, So during those years, it was just me, my grandma, and then my sister, who eventually went off to college, and my younger brother. So, I helped raise my younger brother all the way, to when I went to school, and I would have him every summer. And I was like, I got to figure this out, and my sister was older than me, so she was figuring it out. And so we figured out how to get full scholarships, go to the top universities. And it was hard, even my first year in college, even though I was top of my class in high school, I almost failed, because I wasn't at the same level as all the other students. I hadn't gone to chemistry camp. I didn't have tutors that helped me become an outstanding writer. I was the best of my high school, which was the largest high school in the US, and that came at a cost. I still have memories where I had reduced lunch, but I wouldn't use my reduced lunch because they would force you to eat in the cafeteria. And all the circles I needed to hang out with that were part of my AP classes ate outside in the courtyard. And I knew that if I wanted to be around people with ideas and do things and move up, I would just not eat lunch. And it's all these things that, I talk about these things in my book, that there's these little subtle things, that we could change our system that would make things more accessible and easier for people who are trying to get out, right, of the situations that they're in. And so I made those sacrifices, and even, when I was in college, I wanted to go study abroad. And I remember, and I talk about this in the book, and then the lunch thing came up again. They were like, your scholarship can pay for the whole program except for lunch. I'm like, lunch? Why? I'm like, I need to eat lunch. And so back then, though, I ended up applying for a loan, and I was like, I'm going to eat lunch. But it's these little things, that really put barriers against to people who really want to come out and get ahead. And yes, it was a lot of sacrifice, and I tell everyone in college, like everyone has this typical college experience of like partying and having fun with their friends and everything. Mine was like I had, 6 work study jobs and studied, and I needed to catch up. And so my thing, like I tell everyone that really like the first time like I really like party, drank, let's say, and had like a life was until I went to graduate school, until I was like the same, like caught up. And so graduate school for me was my college, once I had gotten the foundation and like where everyone else was, and it took that sacrifice. But in the end, I did ended up, getting through those check marks and getting through where I needed to go. But, that came at a cost too, right? Because then I also created a whole life of chasing check marks and the definition of the American dream and success. And then I started to lose myself. And maybe, we can continue on that story, but
Yes.
yeah,
And it's okay. I would like to just kind of go back just a little bit
yeah,
of
of
some of the
course.
things that I picked up here is some of the challenges that you faced were included physical ailment, a life-threatening issue. I mean, that's huge. And then also we have financial issues. And then you have, we haven't really super talked about language issues, but I know that that was an issue, not just once, but twice. And then also dealing with the one that just really surprised me, but didn't really surprise me because I know these sorts of things happen, but it just hurts that there is guilt attached, that this is my fault. And now we have events in our lives, we all have events, and then we have meaning that we attach to these events. And so the meaning that you attached to this event is okay, all these problems that I'm seeing, my family is struggling. They're struggling financially. They're struggling. I mean, we're not together as a family. We've been separated not just once, but multiple times. And this is causing problems for my siblings and all of these things. And it's my fault. And I am carrying the burden. And now I have to somehow dedicate my life to making this up to everybody and prove my worth, that I deserve to breathe air on this planet because I'm still here and I'm still breathing. And so I got to prove that I have value, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove to myself and to the people that I care about that that sacrifice was worth it. And my heart is just aching because you were so little. You were so little. And to carry that kind of a burden is overwhelming and absolutely impossible. So I may cry just a little bit, but I hope, are you to a point now where you have been able to take that meaning away from that event and just say, wow, my family loves me so much. I have value to them. And they have shown it over and over and over that I have value and that I am worth it, because that is so big. And I'm so proud of you for all of your accomplishments. I'm proud of you for pushing through, and I think you are stronger and better because of the hard things that you've been through. And yet I don't think that we have to create those burdens for ourselves in order to be happy and to have value. So I'm happy for you. And I'm happy. I would love to hear just a little bit more that how or when you recognized I have value, and these things that took place, these unfortunate circumstances, were not all my fault.
No, it's 100%. I carried it for so long. And actually, one thing I skipped in that is actually that, when I mean, there's so much in that you were saying, I did have that whole language thing where I first almost failed kindergarten because I didn't know English, and then I had to and then they told me to not speak Spanish, and then I had to move to Miami and relearn Spanish. And yeah, a lot of other language trauma I went through too. But there was one key moment I also skipped, that when I was 16 years old, actually, that is the first time that it all weighed on me really heavily. because, I was the perfect child because I had done so much of this people pleasing and I was carrying on that guilt. That one of the things that was the society around me at that time was really emphasizing was, the check mark of what would make you whole is, eventually, you're getting married, right? That check mark and everything. And I was already at 16 building that, because again, I thought I needed to build this thing and give back and have this perfect check marked life. And that's what was going to give me value. And at 16, I had my first boyfriend, all those things, right? It had been a couple years, but and he broke up with me. And at that time, I internalized it as a failure. And it was less, I was heartbroken, right? But it was more about the heartbrokenness. It was that one, I was sad. And so I felt like I was a burden to others. And second, I thought I failed. Like I failed and someone couldn't love me. That's how deep it was. That then I swallowed pills and tried to take my life away.
Oh.
And it was my suicide attempt. And it took me years to realize that was the first time that it was so much. And I couldn't hide any more pain and everything I was going through. And it was the first time, like really directly that, this doctor kind of knew, like I had given my parents another story that I had taken expired medicine. I was trying so hard to hide what I had done that, because I survived it. And I remember the doctor pulled me aside and he was like, you have so much of your life left to live. And look, your family's so worried, they love you. And I remember I broke down going, wow, like I needed that change of perspective. I am loved, and they're so worried for me, even though at the same time I was struggling with the feelings of I'm such a burden. It was the same time they loved me. And I remember breaking down at that moment. And it was the first time where I'm like, I am loved. And there's a reason why I pushed through. And that's the first time I encountered purpose, that I was like, I have a purpose to be here. I got a second chance. So there's something more I can contribute to this world, And from there, I started seeing things a little different. And I started, in school, started thinking about like, channeling it a little different to, I need to help the world. Mm. And that's when I got really into volunteering. And then, into all the career I went into, environmental science, international development, all these things, that I was like, I am here to make an impact in the world. But still, even with that, my journey, I still hadn't stopped and thought about, like you bring up a good point, my value, right? I still was identifying my value as serving everyone else. I still hadn't included me yet. And so it took me until probably several years ago until I chased all the check marks, all the ladders. I was sitting in a leadership role in international development, the dream job that all people wish for, traveling the world. They had given me a house, private school for my children, everything, and then here I was working 15, 20-hour days. And I already had like gone through this whole situation where my daughter almost died and I still hadn't, and that's a whole other story, but I still hadn't thought about myself, that I was still like, no, now it just fueled me to like, oh, continue. I need to provide for her and continue. And I need to do this and I need to do that. And I was sitting in this position. I had brought transformational change, elevated my team, raised $100 million, done all these things. But at the same time, other things were emerging from that, like jealousy from others, hyper scrutiny, allegations from other people. And I started to self-reflect, going, I didn't understand because I was serving everyone. So why is this negative thing coming when everything I'm doing is out of great intentions? And it took me then to realize that I was misaligned, that I had put my focus on everything about everyone else but myself. And at that time, I felt, because of that, all the pressure and everyone depended on me and everything, again, I was back to still being like, I couldn't be anyone's burden and I couldn't burden everyone else. I had to be there for everyone else, but I wouldn't I wouldn't be vulnerable. I wasn't vulnerable and I wasn't, I wouldn't show that out to the world, right? Because I had to be, how could I be that when everyone else depended on me and looked up to me? But I had one person at that time who actually, she was my hairdresser. And she was amazing. And we used to Rita. And we used to talk about everything. She had all these dreams and aspirations. And she also had a very similar story. She hadn't been able to go to college. She really dreamed about going to college. And we started every day talking about like our own legacies, our own dreams, without limitations and without the world asking a billion things from us. What would we do? What would move us? Us, like what are our unique skill sets that we bring to the world? What do people seek us for? All that stuff. And we started going through that together. And it was amazing. We had all these plans. We even started like, I at that point, I was like, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I know nothing about entrepreneurship. I raised money for my team, but I don't have an MBA. I still had like the idea that you needed certain titles, certain thing. I didn't have her street smart. And I was like, it's a silly dream. And she'd be like, no, it's not a silly dream. This is you. This is your, this is our inner voices speaking to ourselves. And we started designing swimsuits together, traveled with our families, and also, like being like, how can I work less? We started developing like a 3-year plan. But again, I was looking at it for like 3 years out, 3 to 5 years out, because I was like, oh, I have my daughter, I have my things, whatever. I need to have calculated risk, all these things. And then one day, and I still get very emotional talking about it. She tells me, she starts telling me she's getting migraines. And I'm like, oh, okay, like you should get them checked out. And she's like, I've always had migraines, but they're like, I've always had them, but they're kind of like really bad. And she started coming over crying, and she's like, I can't even work. Because she used to be a hairdresser for the whole neighborhood, but she would use my house as the base. And so we'd always come and talk at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day. And she was like, I can't work. And I was like, okay, let's get that checked out. So she gets it checked out, and they tell her she needs an operation. But she's like, I need to raise the money. And I'm like, no, don't worry. I got the other, the community involved, and we raised the money for her operation. So she has the money. She's super happy. They rescheduled it a couple times. And this was like, her operation was scheduled for Friday. I see her on Thursday, and she took like the last medication she needed. And she's like, Esther, I'm going to leave my daughter here for the weekend because I don't want her to worry, and it's just an in and out thing. And I'll see you Monday. And I was like, of course, I'll see you Monday, So Friday comes the operation, and her daughter's at my house, everything, we get a call that everything goes okay. And we're like, okay, great. I'll see, maybe I can visit you in the weekend or Monday. And then Saturday, I see her daughter run out the door, and I'm like, where are you going? Because at first I'm treating her kind of like a second mom. Like, where are you going? Are you trying to hang out with your friends? Like, you got to stay here. She goes to me, no, my mom's in a coma. And I'm like, what do you mean she's in a coma? And I'm like, okay, go. And she goes, and then an hour later, they tell us she passed away. And I was destroyed. And I was floored because I didn't even know how to take in the information, what to do with it. And I think my family still says that week was the scariest for them. Even my kids are 9 and 7, because I was just a zombie. I couldn't talk. I would just cry all day. I don't even remember well that week. And the worst part is I go to her funeral, and I go to her wake and a funeral, and everyone is just talking about how precious their life is, but not celebrating hers. And I was so angry, and I was like, and it is traditional in Latino culture to go into a lot of like reflecting on life, and it's finite. But at that moment, I wanted to put all culture away and like scream. I'm like, she's amazing. She had these visions and plans, and she was this amazing person to the community. And I knew all that. And I was so frustrated that it wasn't celebrated there. And she was so much more than everything said. And I know that was from me with all my love exploding for her. And but I was like, I didn't know what to do. And after that, I was like, that was for me the pivotal change in my life. Because from there, I was like, wow, like it wasn't just about my legacy anymore. I had to live our legacy, me and hers, like everything that she didn't get to. She wasn't that much older than me. And I was like, wow, why am I working these 15, 20-hour days for? Do I really need this 5-bedroom house? You know, is what my daughter needs more intervention, or does she need me? You know? And then it was that reflection at that moment was when I was like, I have value. And what would happen if this happened, to me? But then I didn't know how to move forward. I relied on her to us to do it together, entrepreneurship, do this. She was going to be my partner in all this. How am I going to do this alone? How am I going to move forward with all of our plans that were still amazing plans solo? And that required me to believe in myself, in my own abilities, my own worth, and have the courage to make the decisions and the changes I needed to make without worrying about what anyone else thought and anyone else's approval. She was gone, right? My biggest champion was gone. And I would have to move through with the plans on my own. And I had my husband that championed me, but like she, you know what I mean? Like someone who we had like the same vision alignment, right? And that was hard. And that took a lot of belief in myself, belief in my value, belief I could do it, the courage to get out of that job when everyone else told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I was going to put my family at jeopardy, which was another trigger for me because I had grown up like that. And now you're telling me I might put my family at financial hardship. I had to work through those triggers, that past trauma, and also take away all that blame and guilt. I actually went through this whole exercise of first talking to my parents about how things affected me. I remember for the first time losing my cool and being like, that's not my legacy, and communicating what I wanted, which is hard. And then I had to go through my past and forgive myself for certain decisions and people pleasing things. I had even there's a whole other podcast, even relationships. I had given up relationships that I wanted because I didn't want to hurt someone else. Everything was about people pleasing. I had to go back and forgive myself, try to apologize, but also more importantly, it was less about apology to other people. It was more about forgiving myself and go through this whole healing journey and really the journey of what was my purpose, what was my legacy, what moves me, and not feel selfish for pursuing it. And the belief that if I'm in alignment, we will all be fine because mom's fine. And once I did that, I could say all these barriers came in my way doing that, right? Everything was against my favor when I was trying to leave the job. Like it was like, well, if you leave this job, you owe this money. If you leave this job, this consequence. It's not. And I was like, you know what? No, I need to leave. And I left. And then learning how to build a business from the bottom up. And I couldn't use anything from my past job because I was in a public position. I had to build it from the bottom up, working with people, getting testimonial client, because I knew it, I had to believe it worked. I had to believe in my value, believe in myself. And then I did it. And for me, it's like, I know like Rita's there, and I finally got there. So, to like circle back on your answer, I got there and I'm there now. And that's what I help people with, like really getting that alignment, believing yourself, what's your purpose? Because once you're actually alignment and following it, it actually becomes easy, because you're not forcing something that's not for you. You're actually doing something and moving with the motion that's meant for you. Yeah.
Oh, Esther, that's so beautiful. I just want to stand up and cheer. I just want to cheer for you. All of the challenges, all the things that you went through, and how wonderful it is that you had a friend, a mentor that was just who and what you needed to help you to wake up and to recognize that I have value. And it's interesting, it came when you felt like her value was not being recognized. It's like, oh my gosh, do you not see how amazing this person is? And then realizing maybe I don't see how amazing I am. And this awakening, this change, and your courage to move forward and to do what you felt was right, even when other voices were saying, oh, no, don't do that. I'm just so proud of you. And you mentioned talking about our inner voice. And one of the things that you teach is helping to that inner voice become a roar. So it's not just a whisper, but that we have the courage to follow it. And you did. And you had the courage to follow it. So that is so amazing. And you've talked about the amazing, you have always been amazing and you have always done amazing things. But there is a difference between what and why you do it now versus why you did it before. You did amazing things before because if I don't do amazing things, then I have no value and I am a burden to other people and I'm not even worth the air that I breathe. And now it is coming from a place of love and a place of fulfillment. And we can actually do more good that way than we can before when it's, if I don't do this, I'm worthless. So well done. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Oh, I just want to give you a big hug. Let's see. We talked about, oh, your story just is amazing. You talked about inner voice. We talked about some of the things of living with authenticity, about finding joy, that just all the success, checking those boxes. We all love to check those boxes because it feels so good. And other people applaud us and tell us good job. And they say, you are awesome because you checked boxes. But that doesn't mean necessarily that we're happy inside. So we can check boxes and be happy inside. And people often go check boxes first, and then if something amazing or horrible happens, then we think about inside. But I think we can do it the other way around too.
No, absolutely. And it's checking the boxes that are right for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's what you brought up. I remember sitting in my room. I had this room, this office in that 5-bedroom house, 30 plus awards on my wall. And I still felt like I had no impact. And
so what counts?
Yeah, because that wasn't the check mark for me, and I think that's what the organization gave to me as that's proof for you. But for me, it was, it's where I am now, right? It's the what I get fulfillment out of and happiness from is people being able the opportunity to live out their purpose and really have the opportunity to be authentic. And those awards, even though they were 30, they were for different things. They were for doing your job well, for, raising money, for things, but it wasn't the check mark that I needed. And then once I shifted that, to now it's the check marks that are aligned to me and what I value as impact, that give me, that are part of my authentic voice and my authentic self, and what I love about myself. That's amazing. So it's funny, it's a different thing, right? So now it's about just, I wake up, as part of like resilience for myself is remembering that, that I am living every day with purpose and the value I want to bring to the world. I wake up and I read my testimonials every morning. Some people might see that as, oh, those are your little check marks, but no, but for me, it's I wake up and I'm like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing it. And even if it means I'm sending an email to a client, it doesn't matter. It's okay because it's related to that. I'm helping that person with that, with the value I want. You know what I mean? That feels great to me and that I believe is what solves the world's problems, right? It's not what everyone else believes. It's what I believe to be important. And that's the difference. So I tell people, like I have on my book crossed out chasing the American dream. But I mean, it's because it's a cookie cutter thing that we've told everybody this is what gives you happiness. And it doesn't mean I'm not saying that that might not give you happiness, but it's taking that time to reflect to make sure that it's what's aligned with you and makes you happiness. It could be the same things. It could be the house, that job, everything, but it's taking that time to reflect to make sure it's really you. Are you doing this for you? Or are you doing this to please your parents, please your peers, to not be criticized, to be liked, to feel loved? You know what I mean? Like, is it because you really want this? And that's, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You have to value yourself before you're willing to do that. It's like, well, who cares what I want? I mean, that's
Yep.
is not about me. And sometimes we couch that in I'm being selfless. I'm helping others. I'm serving other people. And I am all about serving other people. I love that. But let's
Yeah.
also make sure that we include ourselves in this whole thing. I'm not a doormat. I'm not something to make everyone else better because they can wipe their feet on me. Nope. I have value and I can help lift others. It's like they say, a rising tide lifts all ships. So as we give ourselves permission to love ourselves, to value ourselves, we give permission to those around us to also love themselves and value themselves. And I loved how you talked about there is nothing wrong with stuff. If you want a house and that is your passion, yes, please enjoy. There's nothing wrong. It's not about denying ourselves stuff either. I love how you mentioned, let's get it in alignment with what feels right for me. Oh, love it, love it, love it. Okay, is there anything that you want to make sure we cover today before we close?
One last thing I would say is, you mentioned, right? Like first step is being able to love yourself, right? And having that, and we need to be able to have that space to discover. A lot of the people I work with are like how, I was before, workaholics, right? Constantly on the go and busy. So to even get to the place of being able to discover, like me and my value in this, we have to take a step back and like really incorporate self-care into our lives. And a lot of times, that self-care word, at least like, I remember encountering people be like, oh, that's so soft, or I don't want to journal and do yoga, but that's not that, it's so much bigger than that. So if someone's here listening being like, well, I don't even know what that means, there's like 6 different types of self-care. There's everything. It could be from like travel to taking a walk to calling a friend, but really taking like intentionally put that in our schedule, because once we have that little space to reflect, that tiny space, we can start letting that little voice come. We can start listening to it. So a lot of times we suppress it so much and start and just busy, 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 that we don't want to hear it anymore. And so we like shut it out. But it's really important to let it come in so it can tell you, it tells you where, it tells you every day, are you on the right path? Or it starts to show in our health and our bodies. And we have to take a little bit of time to listen to it, to make sure, that's our first sign. And so I just want to encourage those, like, really, like, if you're not sure, give yourself some space to allow it to come in, so you can start listening to it.
Absolutely. That self-discovery, self-awareness. Beautiful. Well, Esther, this has been a delight. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Tony Robbins. He said, "Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure." Today, I invite our listeners to balance success with authentic fulfillment and joy. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Linda's Corner, please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. I also invite you to check out my nonprofit, Hope for Healing, at the website hopeforhealingfoundation.org. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, or Amazon bestseller, You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.